Walt, I saw the headline in the Financial Times and immediately I thought of the new Beetlejuice movie. The Waymo Uber divorce went public, and as in the movie, it appears that it's getting messy. And then today, Zoox called up Willy Wonka and they got the golden ticket. Holy cow, after 12 years, Zoox is 12 years old, they can finally charge for a ride. And then Aurora reported earnings, and I got a lot of questions out of that. But let's get into the messy divorce, because if you want to pull up Michael Keaton, here's Beetlejuice, or here's Johnny. If you want to go to The Shining, we can get into it. So start with the messy, messy divorce.
That was definitely a very intense opening. Well done. A better cold opening than what I had to endure with some of Brandon Ross's opening songs in the Lightshed podcast. But that should waken up our listeners right from the get-go. And everyone's eyes kind of popped out on Friday. This is after we had recorded last week's episode with the Financial Times giving some more details about this topic that you and I have been talking about for the past year, which is the Waymo and Uber relationship. And while, many people will say, oh, expected, the stock was off 5%, not expected, ultimately by investors to that degree. It was certainly another leg down in the stock. And we've talked about how every kind of, plus and minus of this relationship has resulted in some movement in the stock. But I think the key data here is that Waymo is going to have its own app in Austin and Atlanta in January of 28. The entire contract, Grayson, ends in May of 2028. I think we just have to assume that it will end by then. So we have timelines. And so when we go to Austin and Atlanta in January of 28, we won't have to hope that we get a Waymo, when we use the app and try and figure out ways to get the Waymo there. So I guess the first question I have for you is, do you think this really ends up lasting until January of 2028? Do you think we will not see a Waymo One app in Austin and Atlanta before January of 28?
It's my belief that the game of autonomous roulette will end sooner than the date that the FT reported. Now, if you want to say the cat's out of the bag, and now that it's been publicly documented, publicly reported, and confirmed by the companies in that article, I want to point out it wasn't speculation, it was confirmed by the companies in that FT report. I say, and I'll say this for the record, this relationship is going to terminate sooner rather than later. The question is, does Uber try and hold on until they have a partner to replace it that is ready for it? That is the thing that I'm watching.
In this report, and it's citing the companies, they're talking about complaints on both sides, right? Waymo talking about dirty cars, which I know is one of your hot button items, but also bad routing. When you think about that, very high profile and embarrassing. The mainstream media loves to pick up on these Waymos circling around a cul-de-sac and make the autonomous vehicle look bad. But apparently those cars were sent there by Uber. On the flip side, Uber's talking about, how it doesn't work in weather, okay, or weather no-shows and unsustainable financial terms. Again, according to this, I think, press report. I guess let's start on the Waymo side of things, because they're the ones that seem more anxious to get out of this agreement. It feels like it's Uber that's holding them there till January of 28. If Uber is in fact routing their cars in this way, or the cars are not getting maintained the way Waymo is expected, wouldn't Google have good enough lawyers to have out clauses to get out of these contracts prior to January of 2028?
Alphabet has some of the finest lawyers in the world, and the one thing with autonomy, as we've seen in the various different incidents that have happened with individuals sabotaging these vehicles, there's cameras and there's data. So perhaps these lawyers are going through the data and comparing it to the data they have in-house to potentially find an out. I don't know, I'm just assuming, because you and I both know, and our audience knows, these vehicles gather a lot of data.
Again, let's get a specific answer out of you. When will we see in Austin or Atlanta a Waymo One app?
I will go on the record and I will say by June of 2027.
I'm going to take an under on that, because I just think that this relationship is just, at this point, is publicly, torn. So, what's the point of extending this? And I think, certainly Uber can operate. It could be a quick switch, right? I don't think Uber can obviously continue to operate in that market without any problems. And, I'm not sure how long it really takes Waymo to stick them on their own app. I wouldn't think it takes that long. So I'm going to take the under on your June 27th.
The reason I'm saying June 27, so today's July 30th, these are all hypothetical made up numbers. Waymo's going to have to get a depot. They're going to have to get charging infrastructure in the ground. They're going to have to get permits. That takes time. So you're looking at months of that. And then on the Uber side, I'm also taking the hedge of how long until AV Ride is ready to go in Austin. Perhaps AV Ride will be the new partner that replaces Waymo. That's just an assumption there. But based on the presence that we've seen from the Texas Department of Motor Vehicles, where the AV Ride vehicles are clearly ramping up in Texas.
I mean, that's some optimism right there. By Grayson, on behalf of Uber, with one of their partners in AV Ride. And, I put out a report on this earlier this week. I went through each of the partners, Motional, AV Ride, and our experiences that we both have had with them, Neuro, Rivian, Bobby, Zoox, right? In the U.S., May Mobility even has a partnership. I mean, you look at the most optimistic scenarios for these companies, and a year from today, what in aggregate of cars, autonomous, will they have on the road? I'm going to say autonomous, Grayson. I'm going to say even with a safety driver. I'm going to give you the safety driver. How many you have on the road in a month in aggregate? My guess is less than 1,000. And then compare that to where will Waymo be in a year's time? You know what the number is? 10,000. 10,000 in 30 markets. And how many are the Uber partners going to have in a year? Now, look, we don't judge this industry over the course of a year. It's really where we're going to be in year 3 and year 5 and what have you. But think about that and the catalyst over the next year and how that looks.
Walt, supervised is not autonomous. Supervised doesn't count. Waymo has set the bar. It is not supervised. They've set the bar in terms of vehicles, which are roughly around 3,000 according to Bloomberg. They set the vehicle in terms of ODD size. Waymo is the global benchmark that everybody is striving to meet. And not to be Debbie Downer, but the companies that are on their heels, as you see in the Road to Autonomy Robotaxi Index, it's Baidu. Baidu keeps ramping up. And so it is supervised doesn't count. And if you look at Uber's domestic U.S. partners to get to the scale of Waymo, where they are just clearly based in the U.S., I will give you a number. They are probably at least 3 years behind to get to where Waymo's at least. And that's from a technology standpoint, and that's from a regulatory standpoint. Because if you look at Uber's partnership with Neuro in California, the regulatory time frame, Uber's 3 years behind Waymo in California. Any way you slice it, you start multiplying that around. You say 10,000, I'm going to go 15,000 cars by the time that Uber gets to some sort of meaningful competition, and the cars are going to be sub 1,000. So Waymo's, in all practical purposes, will have a 14,000 car lead. That's a big insurmountable amount, and we're coming to the fall. So is that your beloved Philadelphia Eagles walking their way into the Super Bowl? Is that what Waymo's doing?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but let's start with you're taking even. I was trying to show the disparity with where Waymo is going to be versus the Uber partners, and you even made that disparity deeper. Fine. But in terms of insurmountable, I don't want to say anything's insurmountable. If anything that AI has taught us in terms of these models keep leapfrogging themselves and open models and the fact that, at the end of the day, 10,000 is not, or 15,000 in my mind is not scale, right? In the U.S. alone, Uber and Lyft have 2 million drivers there. So there's nothing is insurmountable. You get things, you get a good OEM relationship, you start cranking these things out off the line. All I'm saying is that what from an investor standpoint, we look at things 3 months, 6 months, whatever, a year. Over the next year, where are these two companies going to be with their partner? And by the way, if, for example, Neuro, which I've said many times in this podcast, has a couple hundred cars in the market that's in one market, that is huge for them. They can raise off of that. They can, build a better, be a stronger partner. But again, you have to view this in the context of where Waymo is at that time. And the other thing that's going to be happening at Waymo at that time is we'll see where the Hyundai relationship is, where maybe initially you've got some upfitting, but maybe Hyundai evolves, into more inline manufacturing, scaling going up even further. And then secondly, what other new OEM that Waymo starts the clock on, which wouldn't necessarily be driving any volume by the middle of next year, but at least what are we going to be doing on this podcast? And another, 50 more episodes from now, we're going to be saying, well, what's happening in the middle of 28, right? You just continue to roll the clock forward. So it's not that the carve number itself is insurmountable. It's kind of where the momentum of Waymo is going to be at that time.
What we do know on the OEM front, the chief product officer Waymo, about 2 months ago, gave a speech in Japan, and Japanese media, Omega, uncovered it and translated it for us, where the chief product officer of Waymo in this speech talked about a quote-unquote deepening relationship with Toyota. It happened. The speech was given in Tokyo, not covered by American press, but covered by the Japanese media. Deepening relationship. And then 4 days ago, the chairman of Hyundai gave a speech in Silicon Valley, talked about Hyundai's deepening relationship. That's going to get very interesting. This is hypothetical. So chief product officer Waymo says deepening relationship with Toyota. Then the chairman of Hyundai says deepening relationship with Waymo. Waymo has two world-class global OEMs potentially with deepening relationships in Hyundai and Toyota. That gets very interesting very quickly if we're reading the signals correctly there.
Time will tell. Now, look, in this note, if you want to read it, just self-register with a company employer's email, www.lightshedtmt.com. We also delved into kind of, where is our friends at NVIDIA and all this, right? This was the one thing that gave Uber stock a bit of a rally at the start of the year. Where are they? And I delve into that and provide 4 recommendations for what Uber should do. So check that out on our website, and maybe we'll get to those 4 recommendations over the next couple of weeks. Should we move on to NHTSA, or do you have anything more to say on this Waymo Uber battle?
I will just give a plug. Walt wrote a beautiful piece, very elegant, and he gave it a little Mark Twain twist to it.
That sounds like a Trump. Very beautiful, very elegant.
Well, if you don't like the people that read it, you can tell them to self-deport out of the article, but then that's a whole different story. So that's that. Read the article. But on the golden front, Zoox got the golden ticket. NHTSA says, here you go. Here's your golden ticket with a cap, 2,500 vehicles. But most importantly, they can charge. Andy Jassy must be doing cartwheels, backflips. Now that I said that, now they can charge. Do we get any statement from Andy Jassy on the Amazon earnings call about Zoox that they can actually charge? After 12 years and billions of dollars, they can finally make $1.
I hope that they're going to get at least some type of shout out, because you're right. This is a momentous occasion. Thanks to the NHTSA administrator Morrison, who's kind of pushed this forward. I think it's 2,500 vehicles per year for 2 years, so they can get up to 5,000. Which again, that would be a huge win for Zoox. You and I both have our questions about where that technology is in its capabilities right now. You may be able to charge. I'm not sure how many people are going to be willing to pay if you're only doing like 6, 7, 8 stops in a given market. So we'll see. We'll have to see how the technology advances. I don't think they were waiting on the NHTSA administrator before they're going to unleash, true flexible, let's call it, autonomous service rather than just, these fixed locations. But yeah, positive. And what is the read through in terms of Tesla? Because I actually kind of, in a way, view it a bit negatively in that I don't like this 2,500 cap. For Zoox, I don't care, because I think 2,500 would be a win for them. For Tesla, where it's like, okay, the theory is when it's on, and it should be going gangbusters. Then I'd get worried if there's any type of limitation of the cybercab of less than 2,500 a year. So is that, in fact, bad signal for Tesla if there's some type of cap that's associated with these, wheel and pedal out vehicles?
I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing for Zoox, and I don't think it's a bad thing for Tesla. I think it's the opposite. It's a very positive movement for the entire robo-taxi industry. Zoox, it benefits more because their vehicles clearly cannot scale as fast as Cybercab. But at 2,500 vehicles, you said 5,000 for 2 years. That is a healthy amount of vehicles out there. Look at Waymo's publicly reported number by Bloomberg, 3,800. So in 2 years, 5,000 cybercaps is quite a big number. And then perhaps, we don't know, we have to look to Mr. Administrator Morrison for clarity on there. Perhaps after that 2 years, that cap goes away. Perhaps it's if you want to use the spring training or the minor league. So I view it as a positive because Tesla apparently, or clearly based on the ruling, has a very viable path to deploying 2,500 cyber cabs a year.
I mean, I could not disagree more in that, like, yeah, 5,000 seems great now for a company in Tesla who in Austin has been in that market for a year and can't even get to our benchmark, the Autonomy Markets benchmark of 100 cars available for commercial service. Sure, in that context, it looks great. But in the context of the believers in Tesla, and I try to believe in whatever company, is hoping to achieve, the theory is that, once you get these miles done for the Cybercab, which last podcast we talked about, maybe it's 250,000 miles, maybe it's the end of the year. It's like, first you're walking, running, whatever it is, then you're sprinting. Like, if you're good to go at the end of the year, you're telling me that gigafactory that we visited can't crank out multiples of 2,500 cybercabs a year? Of course they can. Of course they can. So if you're now getting handcuffed, so is this an inkling of them potentially getting, handcuffed, by this new thing? Or is this just kind of phase one? And by the time Tesla gets ready to go, and then its administrator is getting the data that he wants and he's demanding, especially in terms of first responders, that number is going to be removed altogether.
My reading the tea leaves, it's phase one. And then over time, once the data, the safety case is validated, that number evaporates.
Let's move on to something else that was in this letter from the administrator, which is this, I'm not even sure how to pronounce this, but it's an A2SEN consortium with SAE, who you have done some work with, explicitly aimed at a single national standard. Is this what can relieve us of these 2,500 car caps, or what is that part of it all about?
Yes, and so first and foremost, Pete Doty, sir, job well done, sir, job well done. So this is going to run through SAE ITC. It's a consortium. It's a best practice, not a standard. I want to clarify. There's a big difference. ITC issues best practices. SAE International, through the working groups, issue standards. So this group is going to come together, and industry will develop a best practice for safety to set a national safety standard. And it is my belief, once the industry buys into the standard and then it is recognized by NHTSA and the federal government, the cap, the 2,500 cap per year, will go away at that point. So to me, what Administrator Morrison did was say, okay, we are going to give you a path to start charging. And once the best practice is done and the federal government signs off on it, that cap will go away. So watch the work that Pete Doty and the wonderful team at ITC are going to do. It's going to be really, really important. It's going to have frankly, a huge impact on the future of robotaxis in America.
So maybe that's the answer I was looking for, which is that this 2,500 thing or the Zoox approval is just priming the pump. It's getting the federal government behind the industry while you have local municipalities fighting it, at least in some areas. But the longer term is a single national standard, which by the time, hopefully, that Tesla is ready to go, which I know people that are more bullish than I think that's like tomorrow, but to me it seems like more like end of the year, early next, that this stuff will be resolved. How quickly does SAE, how quickly do you think this consortium can work? How quickly can they deliver, do you think, on a single national standard? Obviously, the timeline here is the president's term.
Just to clarify, and not to go in the weeds, it's a best practice, not a standard. It's really going to depend on how fast the consortium can move. I will give you a very optimistic, bullish number, 12 months. Realistically, you're probably in the 16th month range. It just depends on how fast the consortium and the members of the consortium want to move.
Well, you need to talk to your friends that are at the consortium and tell them they're going to need to work a little bit faster than that, because this technology is moving faster than that. So I don't think we want to wait for 12 to 16 months for a best practices standard.
It's going to happen, and it's not the individuals and Pete Doty's team and all the individuals that work at ITC running it. It is the companies themselves, because this is a collaborative process. and how much resources are the companies going to put? How much effort and time are they going to put? And so I just think historically of looking all the great work that ITC has done over the years. I'm sticking to that 12 to 16 month range. Would it be awesome to go faster? Yes, but the realistic likelihood of it happening is less than 10%.
All right, so now let's move on to, we had a lot of earnings this week. We're going to have a lot of earnings next week. Aurora, Qualcomm, a couple of the OEMs. Let's start with Aurora, which we talked a little bit about last week because of some of the customer milestones and driver out milestones that they were hitting. They gave some updates. Things were a little slower than what I had hoped in terms of some of the near term stuff, but it's really getting to next year, right? And the number of trucks that they're going to have at year end next year, which is 1,000. The number of trucks they're going to do this year is 200. It's definitely very back end loaded. But it's next year, 1,000, 300, I think, of which are going to be Volvo, with our friends over at Volvo Autonomous Solutions. So I think a lot of those, or most of those, will be driver as a service for Aurora. So that's capital efficient, right? Because because those are Volvo trucks. But the majority is going to be, whether it's Conti or their existing guy making, upfitting existing trucks. Seems like an aggressive target to get to that number of 1,000 trucks by the end of the year. What are your thoughts?
It seems aggressive. Are there enough international trucks to go around? I'm not trying to poo-pah this. I'm merely asking a question because you have to look at the fleets, the carriers in these trucks. And Plus has a public partnership with Plus. We don't know where that stands with international, so we have to look into that. Are there enough trucks to go around? I mean, that's really truly the line. And then does Roush have enough spare capacity to hit that number? So I think there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen in order to make this happen. I'll be watching, I'll be rooting for it, but there's a lot of things have to go right in order to hit that number.
Well, it sounds like Roush has the capability, but the reason that they didn't get to this, 20 a week that they were supposed to be getting to in Q3, based on the numbers, because they're only going to end Q3, with 25 trucks in service. Sounds like it wasn't really Roush. It was this FiberNet, I guess, or whoever is the one before Amoyo, which is the ex-Conti, is delivering them the stacks. Again, all of this is like near-term noise, proof of concept. Even owning the trucks for this company is really proof of concept, right? That ultimately what you need, just like Uber needs to own the cars to get it out there and happen. But ultimately what's going to happen is they're going to want these trucking companies to buy the stack, from effectively Continental or whatever it's called now, Mobio, and then just charge them based on, on a service plan.
At the end of the day, Aurora doesn't want to be asset heavy, but when I look at all this and I still have questions and I can't get straight answers, is that when Sasko and the team at Volvo Autonomous Solutions ramp up and they're running the Aurora driver, and then Aurora ramps up, who goes where and who competes with what, and how does the margin split work? Because I truly believe that Volvo Autonomous Solutions is going to be a major, major player in the future of autonomous trucking.
Yeah, look, I have a lot of questions about how these contract works, how they're charged for miles, how it's accounted for, not necessarily getting clear answers on all of them. I'm sure that's because it's a bit of a work in progress, and I'm guessing that they're going to agree to whatever contract terms the customer wants. But I think also the importance of the near-term stuff is it helps them raise capital. And, they have money out until early 2028. But, even in this quarter when the stock was at $7, which some may find expensive and some may find cheap, but they were willing to issue shares through this program that, effectively diluted the stock additionally because you're basically bringing in cash. But that's what you do, right? You're opportunistically and you opportunistically bring in cash. So now as you approach 28, you want to have more cash. So in order to get more cash, you want to have that be as cheap as possible. So you want your stock to be higher. And by announcing new customers, by announcing more trucks that are getting upfit from Roush, whether they're international or whoever, that's going to help them, get to this end state of, whatever, driver as a service, Volvo cranking them out, and the thousands of trucks that are there. So ultimately these near-term numbers become very important, even though it's, you can argue like who gives a crap about the 20 trucks, sorry, Mom, the 20 trucks that they have with PACCAR now that they're basically going to like not use by the end of the year. Well, because it just shows some use of the product, and again, enables the company to raise money. So that's where these, and by the way, I've done this 30 years. I've seen these types of near-term unit KPI metrics and how they, have an outsized importance in the overall success of the company. And I think it's going to be no different. Aurora needs to do a better job at communicating precisely how many trucks are going to be in the market, at what time, and by who, and under what type of revenue structure, even if it's not what it might look like 3 years from now.
Communication's key, and I'll ask for this. Autonomous/driverless miles do not count if they're supervised. So what is the true number without a human in the cab? That is the number that says a lot, because when there's a human in the cab, a human technically has the ability to take over, and when there's a human in the driver's seat supervising it, they're not autonomous, they're supervised. That is a different mile. Like to see some clarity on that. And then, do we get any color as it relates to the PACCAR relationship? We saw the CEO of PACCAR came out and said, "No way, Jose, we're not letting anybody go drive her out." Do we get any clarity from Aurora on their call as it relates to the relationship with PACCAR? Is it over? Are they mothballing these trucks?
I mean, it's definitely not over, and I think if anything, they sound without stating anything specific, optimistic about, as they get future generations of their their sensor stack, bringing them back into the fold, and that occurring in the 2027 calendar year. But to your point, PACCAR, just the body language is quite dismissive on their earnings call about, where they're, or how they're, and if they're ready to go.
Yeah, to me, it was just, thanks, next question. It just seems, based on all the public communication from PACCAR, that there is no desire at any point in time to allow any of their partners to go drive. I know we're talking about Aurora, but the one that I would love to get clarity on is Stack. Stack has a very public partnership with PACCAR, and they're saying that they're going to go drive her out, and then PACCAR is saying, no, you can't go drive her out. It just seems to me that the partners want to do one thing, and PACCAR is saying no, and not so fast. And then this raises a question that you and I have debated on past podcasts. The OEM risk is real. The question is, how big of a risk is the OEM?
I think it's probably bigger than people give it credit for. And I think what this industry needs is our friend Sasko at Volvo Autonomous Solutions to really drive forward, push this, crank out a lot of service, and force these other OEMs to rethink their slower approach, because it takes years, I think, to make this happen. So I think, we're particularly rooting hard for Volvo Autonomous Solutions, primarily with Aurora. They claim maybe with Wabi. We'll see if anything gets delivered there next year, to try and competition, Grayson, always breeds innovation across the board. So I think that's what we need. It feels like Aurora is gaining some momentum in that regard.
I mean, we'll sit here and watch. I think the autonomous trucking industry, from a developer standpoint, all the competitors in that field are doing a really good job developing their technology, and they're getting ready to cross the Rubicon and unleash commercialization. And the question is, do you really need an OEM? Because this appears that Aurora's buying them from the dealer. Perhaps that's the route that everybody else is going to go, because it eliminates I'll call it, and I'll term it, the PACCAR risk.
One last point on Aurora. Not one question on the earnings call about Tesla Semi. And that is striking. We will see where that occurs, or what that's like, in 2 or 3 quarters. Let's compare that with my telco land. And, I would have said, however many 4 or 5 quarters ago, when we were kind of early in pointing out that SpaceX would be potentially putting up cell towers to compete with these guys. No questions on it at the time. Now it's like dominates these calls. So it's a bit shocking. We did get a congratulations and a great quarter from one guy twice. He was busy patting them on the back, but maybe ask about the competitive dynamic. It seems pretty relevant.
It's like the clap you have. It's the great quarter guys, you, Rich, and the team at at Lightshed with Brandon. You do one hell of a job documenting this. And I have to ask, and I'm always curious from the outsider standpoint, why would anybody open up a call and say, great quarter, guys? What is behind that? Because you have the scorecard at Lightshed, and I love watching it, but I listen to this like, come on, aren't you an analyst? Why are you rooting and saying great quarter? I don't get it.
Well, they're trying to get back on the call, but even before we had our earnings call scorecard, in Wall Street, most people communicate via Bloomberg, and the amount of Bloombergs that we get during some of these questions, when some of the analysts are puckered up, I don't know, but I guess it's important to get on that call for them. Speaking of earnings calls, Qualcomm, who is now on our radar, also had an earnings call, and they had, I think, an announcement, Grayson. BMW selected them as the lead compute silicon provider for next generation ADAS and the digital cockpit. If I recall, BMW earlier this year ended their personal pilot L3. I think that was a Mobileye system. Not sure. I think Innoviz was the LiDAR in there. That product, I think, flopped and basically was removed in April, too limited. So now the next thing we hear about these guys in terms of ADAS is partnering with Qualcomm. And I was at their investor meeting not far back, and they were pushing on, how they see a huge opportunity, kind of like, we ride, get in the door with ADAS first, and then hopefully grow that to a full autonomous system.
BMW, what they told Automotive News was they canceled the L3 citing costs. But Automotive News, and the team is still left there. I know Pete Bigelow's not there, but the team at Automotive News did some great research on that, did some digging, and Automotive News reported that it wasn't selling. So it wasn't selling at the end of the day. And then spoke with some friends in the insurance world, and they said it's liability. All that aside, it is a great win for Qualcomm and their ambitions for their Snapdragon digital chassis. And what it also does is it further what you and I have discussed at great lengths, and we saw it on the Tesla earnings call, the growth of the L2 plus ADAS market. We're seeing it with WeRide. Now we're seeing it with Qualcomm. That market is going to become an absolute juggernaut in automotive.
Yeah, I mean, they specifically shouted it out as a, quote, significant portion of the design pipeline. Someone did ask them about autonomy, and basically the answer was like, well, it's kind of creeping in, and then pivoted right back to talking up the opportunity for ADAS, because that is, in the near term particularly, a huge revenue, and, with a hat tip to Odyssey and perhaps the Trojan horse into becoming the chip guy for autonomy, when it gets there, as opposed to their competitors, which are largely NVIDIA and I guess to a lesser extent Mobileye.
And don't forget ARM. As we know, ARM has grand ambitions in this field as well, but I'll make a prediction, and it's not an out there prediction. At some point in the future, a Mobileye architecture will end up powering an autonomous vehicle. L4. The question is when, not if.
And Qualcomm wasn't the only one where we got positive signal, from what's going on in that market, ADAS. GM talked about the best ever quarter for Super Cruise. It's going to be standard on their high-end Silverado trims. So that's like 160,000 incremental units. The attach rates are like 30 or 40% on this. That's really, I think, pretty good. Obviously, this is not Tesla level ADAS, right? They're still talking about 2028 eyes off, hands off program to meeting that milestone for that time lane. I think our buddy Sterling Anderson, I think, is going to have a big part to do with that, but we don't hear much from Sterling Anderson. He got hired. He was all over the place speaking at conferences. The guy's gone quiet. I think he was with the president recently when the president visited GM, but beyond that, I don't know what to think of where they are on their progress to getting to that eyes off, hands off program.
Yeah, we haven't heard much from Sterling. They had a technology day, so Sterling was there as the lead presenter of that. And then we did see Sterling with the president at GM, but I give GM a lot of credit for embracing this L2 strategy, and I wish them well. And from all the reports that I'm reading out of the Detroit News, that they're making progress on it. But the only caveat that I have on this, I think, pre-mapped, predefined routes is not the future. Tesla is clearly proving with FSD supervised that you don't need to pre-map it. GM could push back and say, oh, it's the liability, it's the liability. But at the end of the day, if you're going to go visit your mom, you don't want to just get on 95 and use it when you get off 95. Uh-oh, I can't use it. That's not a good experience. That is a half-baked experience.
I could not agree more. I love the fact that you use half-baked, and I feel like we need to set up another Bigelow battle, except rather than Raquel battling Sterling on that whole concept of end-to-end versus having these routes, we're going to insert Grayson Brulte for the fight. Can we get that? Can we recreate that at this year's CES? Grayson versus Sterling, end-to-end versus map.
I think they're the only. I would gladly do it, Sterling. I know you listen, so I'll gladly do it. But the only issue is I think Sterling and I would agree too much.
Well, I'm sure if I was the moderator, I could probably stimulate some type of battles. Now let's move on to Ford. I do, in fact, also own a Ford on top of my Tesla. By the way, Grayson, I think I'm approaching 7,000 miles of FSD on my Tesla. But I do own a Ford, and I've got this BlueCruise, and Ford on their earnings call saying the paid subs is up 20%, and which is now 50% of their integrated service revenue, 840 miles driven. I've tried to use it. It's garbage. I mean, it's literally just garbage. Like when you use a Tesla and you think BlueCruise is going to do something, it is just, there's nothing good about that. So I'm glad they can pat themselves on the back on their earnings call. But if that's what you consider any type of ADAS or anything other than glorified, whatever, what do they call it? Glorified, what's the term when the car stays the same? You have to edit this part. Cruise control. You edit all this shit out. Anything more than glorified cruise control, if anything, it's worse because it like forces me to have my hand on the wheel. I'd rather like not have my hand. It's just bad. So sorry, Ford. Do better.
It is bad, and Ford knows this. I don't know if you know this. A while ago, Ford gave me a press car to try BlueCruise, and it didn't get a field report. It was not very good at all. I took it out for 2 test drives and it sat in my driveway. It was completely unusable. It was that bad. So it's unfortunate. They're behind.
It's terrible, and it gives it a bad name for ADAS overall. But we digress. So what do we have on the foreign autonomy desk for this week, Grace?
This week, the foreign autonomy desk is taking us to the land of tea and crumpets. No, we're not going to Buckingham Palace soon, though. Why is that relevant? It's relevant because of the way that London is zoned. We put on our inspector hats and we took a look at the announcements. Baidu announced that they are testing the RT6 robotaxi in London with both Uber and Lyft. Couple of interesting things to point out there. One, Uber on X put out a generic mocked up Photoshop photo. And oh, by the way, there was a URL on the vehicle. I put it in, it didn't work. Baidu PR had to write to Uber to correct it. All public on X. Furthermore, Uber did not release an area where they're going to be testing the vehicle. Lyft, on the other hand, put out a beautiful non-Photoshop photo. Interesting thing there, no Baidu logo on that. Baidu PR, again, on X sends a photo. You can see the back has a Baidu logo. Where Lyft is testing the RT6 is out by Wembley Stadium. We don't know where Uber's testing, but the reason I say Buckingham Palace, it's not testing in the heart of London, which raises the question, will these vehicles be deployed in the heart of London, or will they be deployed very similar, sorry Tesla, to how Tesla deploys on the outskirts of cities? Something to watch, Walt, something to watch.
Yeah, I can't wait to see, but, as a shout out, the Eagles are playing in London this year. Liverpool has a new head coach and no Mo Salah anymore. There's plenty of reasons that I would love to come to London and check out whatever technology companies happen to be headquartered there and see where the progress is on their cars. What do we would love to, let's just put it this way. We'd love to do more field work in the great city of London.
Well, I'll let you in on a little secret, but don't tell our listeners and viewers. 2 companies have invited me for rides, and I'm glad to bring you along. Rob and I are going. We're allowed to on you on. We'll be the 3 Stooges going around London doing field work. So 2 companies have invited me. You know who you are, and a huge thank you. And one hasn't. And that's for the audience to guess because I will not reveal who that is.
I think our audience knows who that is, but can I drag you up to Liverpool for a matchup there? It's an unforgettable experience at Anfield.
You can drag me up there and I will be the world's biggest fan. How's that?
That's wonderful. What else do we have on the foreign autonomy desk?
Staying on the Baidu front, in Hong Kong, Baidu received a permit to go full driverless. Right-hand driving, very interesting to watch. We broke it down on Autonomy Signals last week what that means, but Baidu is full driverless in Hong Kong.
And then also, I guess China is resuming their robotaxi permits. I saw some headlines on Bloomberg on that. This is the post-Wuhan review, so I'm sure they've gotten through some of those issues there, hopefully. So China's back in motion.
Come on, baby, let's do the locomotion. Yes, they are back in motion. The Autonomous Belt and Road Initiative of China is in full strength, moving full speed ahead. What do we need to look for next week as China moves ahead on robotaxi?
I mean, once again, I've got a lot of earnings, and the big one is going to be Uber. Reporting the Q2. What's your guess? How many questions into the Q&A is it going to take before Dara gets the Waymo question?
Well, I have to answer that with a question. How long until we get great quarter, guys? So does that come first? And then you actually get the Waymo question coming second. That's the question to watch.
We also have Lyft, Kodiak, Serve, and a bunch of LiDAR guys reporting. So it'll be another busy week of reporting. I think you have a NHTSA deadline tomorrow on the 31st. So that'll be out before the podcast is released. We'll see who files, within there. So we'll have plenty to talk about next week, Grayson. There'll be no shortage of content next week. And as a reminder, if you want to read my 4 recommendations for Uber ahead of their earnings call to solve this autonomy, quagmire that they're facing over the next year, just log on, www.lightshedtmt.com. Although, if you're a competitor from a different bank, your domain will be blocked. Sorry, do your own work.
No research for you. I got a shirt for you there. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is no pedals, no steering wheel, and scaling. Walt, until next week.